OP thinks her sister-in-law's best friend is trying to get with her husband. Here's the full story with an update. My sister-in-law, 23 female, is my husband's 28 male half-sister. She was the product of their mother's infidelity. His father divorced their mother when he was 12, after he found out through a paternity test she wasn't his. My father-in-law refused to have anything to do with my sister-in-law, but continued to have a relationship with my husband. Because of this, my sister-in-law is very clingy to my husband. My husband is also very protective of his sister and generally doesn't tolerate anything negative being said about her, which is why I'm posting this here before mentioning anything to him. My husband and I bought a house last year which has its own indoor swimming pool. My sister-in-law was super excited when she saw it and asked if she could use it sometimes with her friend. We said it was fine, as long as she gave us a notice before she turned up. Her and her friend, Chloe, have used it many times before, but almost never when my husband is home. He is a lawyer and works long hours. With lockdown, my husband has started to work from home. My sister-in-law asked me if she and Chloe could come over and use the pool. I told her I was uncomfortable with them coming over as I'm pregnant and don't want to accidentally expose the baby to anything risky. My sister-in-law then asked if she and Chloe quarantined for 2 weeks, would they be able to come over? My husband said it was fine. 2 weeks later they turn up to my house. My husband was in his office, so they go straight to the pool after making small talk. My husband ends up coming out after an hour and we're hanging out in the kitchen. My sister-in-law walks in to get a drink and she starts talking to my husband. Before she goes back to the pool, she says Chloe's going to be so happy to see you. It was weird because my husband and Chloe aren't close. Chloe comes into the kitchen 2 minutes later and spends the rest of her time talking to my husband until he excuses himself to get back to work. She's super giggly and smiley when she talks to him. He would say something sarcastic and she would laugh like it was the funniest joke she's ever heard. It honestly felt like she was flirting with him. Before she went back to the pool, she gave me this weird smirky look. Before they leave, they ask my husband if he's working from home every day of the week. He confirms he is. The next 2 weeks, they come over to the house to swim every single day. Except, Chloe never gets in the water. Instead, she hangs around the house in her bikini. She was previously wearing a one-piece, if it makes a difference, every single day. Whenever my husband comes out to hang around me, she quickly interrupts him and keeps him talking until he has to go back to work. I made lunch for us all, and when I excused myself to call my husband down, my sister-in-law quickly stopped me and said Chloe could call him for me. They shared a look and Chloe looked really happy when she went to get him. Chloe has also started to get touchier with my husband. She's put her hands on his chest and arms, stands or sits really close to him. To my husband's credit, he does usually create space between them whenever she does something like this. The reason I believe my sister-in-law is in on this, because she's made a few pregnancy-related jabs at me recently. She told me a story about how one of her friend's boyfriends was cheating on her and then said something along the lines of, "Did you know a lot of men start cheating when their wives are pregnant?" She's also made comments about how I look chubby now and it looks weird next to my husband because he's well built. If she spots my husband out of the office, she quickly goes to inform Chloe. I know pregnancy hormones can mess with a person's brain, so I'm wondering if I'm just looking for something that isn't there. My sister-in-law sent me a text yesterday asking if they could come over to swim next week, and I really want to say no. But I know she'll whine to my husband if I do. I ideally want to have a conversation with him before then, but I'm not sure if I should mention the flirting. Am I being delusional? Update. We were watching a movie and my phone lit up with another text from my sister-in-law, telling me she was now going to be here at 1 p.m. the next day to swim with Chloe. My husband saw it and told me to tell her not to come. This is really weird behavior for my husband because he tends to do anything to accommodate my sister-in-law, and very rarely refuses her anything. I asked him if something had happened and he shrugged it off and we kept watching the movie. A few minutes later he paused the movie and said he wanted to ask me a question. He asked if I'd noticed Chloe never swam when she came to our house. I ended up laughing hysterically. I was honestly just so relieved he'd brought it up instead of me having to be the one to do it. I think my husband thought I was losing my mind. When I finally stopped laughing, he repeated the question and said he wanted a serious answer. I said, "Of course I've noticed," and he awkwardly replied, "So, you must have noticed the other thing too." To summarize the conversation that followed, my husband hadn't noticed Chloe was flirting with him the first few days because he was so busy with work. He wasn't really paying attention to anything else. He said when she started getting handsy is when he suddenly had the light bulb moment that she was into him. He says he didn't want to unnecessarily stress me out, so he never mentioned anything. But he was worried. I'd noticed too, and thought he was interested because he hadn't immediately shut it down. He realized we would eventually have to have this talk, but he wasn't sure how to bring it up. He did privately speak to Chloe and told her he was happily married and wasn't interested in starting anything with anyone else. Apparently, she never took him seriously because she kept doing it. In the end, he called his sister on Sunday to tell her either she got her to stop or Chloe couldn't come over anymore. His sister ended up having a tantrum and said a few nasty things about me, the baby, our relationship. She insisted I was somehow behind his request and made some comments about how I was controlling and insecure because I looked like a beach whale and Chloe was younger and hotter. He was pretty pissed at this and said if she said something like that about me again, he would stop speaking to her. She claimed I had baby trapped him. And when my husband pointed out we were already married, so I didn't need to trap him, and that he was the one who wanted to start a family, she kept insisting I had manipulated him into feeling that way. She claimed he was unhappy in our relationship and he always looked tired because I was forcing him to slave away to fund my fancy lifestyle, whilst I sat on my back all day. He pointed out he chose to be a lawyer knowing he would have to work long hours and I had only recently left my job, so her accusations were baseless. She said some other stuff along the same lines, but the thing that made my husband finally snap was when she said it. The baby was already ruining everything and it was just going to get worse when it was born, and he should have dragged me to the abortion clinic whilst he had the chance. He told her neither her nor Chloe were welcome in our home anymore until they apologized for how they'd been behaving and for the things my sister-in-law said. He said he wasn't sure he could ever forgive or forget what she'd said about our child, even if she did apologize, and he couldn't believe she would even think something like that, let alone say it. Apparently, she started crying and said she was sorry, that she didn't mean it, and she was just scared to lose him and that she wasn't thinking clearly. He hung up on her. He showed me his phone and she's been calling him and texting him since, begging him to reply. He asked if she'd said anything to me. I was debating whether to say anything or not, but he kept insisting he knew she had said something, and he wanted to know what it was. I told him the things I mentioned in the original post and a few other things she had said. He asked me why I never mentioned anything when she first said it, and I mentioned how he got really defensive whenever I said anything even slightly negative about his sister, and he got defensive. I pointed out he was doing it again, and after some back and forth he admitted that maybe he was a little bit defensive when it came to her. But he promised to stop and he wanted to make sure we could talk about anything, including his sister. He ended up mentioning wanting to try couples counseling. He said it wasn't because he thought there was something wrong with our relationship, but apparently he has been speaking to his dad a lot recently, and he mentioned one thing he regretted about his marriage with mother-in-law is that they never went to therapy until the cracks in their relationship were too big. In his current marriage they go, and it's helped him avoid the mistakes of his first marriage. I agreed, so we're probably going to try that soon. My husband thinks my sister-in-law will eventually turn up even if we tell her not to, but he promised he'd deal with her if she does. A couple communicating honestly, that solves a problem, and going to therapy for a check-in to help them facilitate better communication in the future. You love to see it. Wishing you and your husband the best, and I hope this means a little less stress for you during your pregnancy. Seeing him suggest counseling before minor issues grow into actual problems is so good to see. I'm glad he's so invested in making sure their relationship is the best it can be. A lot of people balk at counseling because they see it as having failed, but I see it as a great thing. It's right there in the name after all. It's having a neutral, professional party guide couples through what could otherwise be pitfalls in marriage, and teach them the best ways to support, communicate, and problem solve in a healthy way. Chloe and your sister-in-law sound massively trashy. It sounds like sister-in-law may be jealous of the baby, and that's a bigger issue than Chloe. Sister-in-law is needy and the baby is going to take priority over her. Chloe is just a distraction and a tool to get him away from OP and baby. I bet there will be a lot more need to stick up for the baby in the future. I feel sister-in-law is desperate because she has a childhood trauma. She needs professional help to deal with it. But with time and patience you can even have an almost normal relationship with her. But she needs to see that you are a united front and that the new baby is here to stay. Your DH has filled the father figure and now she fears he will bail on her cost the new baby. And that has to be really scary. She is dealing with it with the tools she knows, with deception and cheating. Sister-in-law has her claws deep in Chloe, so if she can get OP out of the picture and hook husband up with Chloe, she can control both of them as she sees fit. She is a classic narcissist, complete with lashing, Meltdown tantrum when her plan was foiled. Sister-in-law's issues are probably due to her childhood, and clearly hubby is empathetic to her history. That's actually fair enough, but maybe OP should keep Chloe away until they have a strategy for her. Keep everything on their terms. OP, if you see this, therapy will be great. I suspect your husband knows that he needs an unbiased third party to adjust his view of Chloe. He knows her history and struggles, so he is sympathetic, which makes him defensive. But he also can see she was behind this and maybe wants to reassess his view of her. Also, relationship maintenance is never a bad idea, even in the happiest marriages. Good luck, glad things turned out well for you. Husband moved in his siblings without letting me know. All of our future plans have basically been thrown away, and I'm heartbroken. Here's the full story with an update. Husband 37 male, and I 32 female, have been married for 5 years. For some context, his siblings, twins, male, female, early 20, are underdeveloped physically and mentally. They can take care of themselves as far as wiping themselves, going to the bathroom and feeding themselves. But they are rather weak, having brittle and fragile bones, and combined with their mental maturity, which is similar to that of about a 12 to 13-year-old, they have to be monitored, cooked for, assisted with going upstairs, moving around for long distances, etc. They can't take care of themselves financially because of all this. All of this I knew while we were dating, but they were being cared for by a team of nurses and caregivers at that time, not in our home. But about a few months ago, the team was all fired. My husband told me that he was planning to move them in, and about a week or so later, they were moved in, along with a new team. I had no say or even much of a heads up about any of it. The house suddenly became full of staff. Someone was always there. Our privacy was basically snatched away. My husband already has a busy schedule. He's a doctor, on call a lot, and now I feel like we barely have time to ourselves. I'm competing with everything and everyone. We were about to start a family now that we were all settled. Things were good between us, but now everything has been thrown into chaos, and I don't know how to feel. I feel almost a sense of grief. I feel like I have no control of anything. I feel like he just threw away our future and plans, as cruel as that may sound. We had a talk and everything was pointing toward a divorce, but I just feel so bitter. I feel like he's just giving up. He feels like I'm not being thoughtful enough. I love him more than anything and want to salvage our marriage if I can, before just making any snap decisions. Also, I should say, his parents are estranged. I've never met them, not even before we married. He cut them off a while ago, for a very understandable reason. All I can say is, you can endure this as long as you can. But, if it comes the time where you feel unable to continue, you need to leave, for your own mental health. As sad as it might be, you can't set yourself on fire to keep them warm just because you want to stay with him. Sooner or later, there'll be a moment where it comes between you or them. Your husband already told you who comes first. I'm not saying to hold this over him or even feel resentful. All I'm saying, you gotta keep this thought at the back of your mind once, if the hammer drops. I understand his trauma, but this isn't healthy for him. It's certainly not healthy for you, and you should both be seeing individual therapists in the matter. You should really consider if bringing children into this house and this relationship ever is a good idea. It's not, and if not, if you're willing to give up on motherhood for someone who doesn't do much, as consider you when making major life decisions. By the way, as a parent, I wouldn't make a move like that without warning and preparing my child. And as a spouse, I would never even have overnight visitors without talking to my husband. It's not just that he loves his siblings, it's that you're an afterthought. Taking responsibility for his siblings is one thing. Justifying it by creating a hierarchy of feelings is another. I might be old-fashioned, but telling your spouse you love someone else more than them is just unacceptable. That alone should be a deal breaker. I see red flags in his attitude towards you, and the present situation has nothing to do with it. After taking some time to myself to think, I sat down with my husband when he was off call and told him I wanted to talk about everything that's happened. He told me that he wanted to talk too, and we had a raw heart-to-heart about everything. We discussed the main issue that I mentioned in my previous post. I told him that I felt hurt about him not consulting or even telling me about what was going on, and he sincerely apologized for it, telling me that he wasn't thinking about much else other than their situation, which I understood, even if it still made me feel a certain way. But then he told me that he needed to be honest to me about something, and that he understood that it may affect things between us, but that the whole situation with his siblings and their previous care team made him realize it even more. He became very blunt. He told me that while he loves me more than anything, he loves them more and that he has to put them first from now on, above anything. He told me that he couldn't handle anything else happening, and that everything he's done, the cameras, moving and the staff was necessary. And while this of course hurt for me to hear, even though I understand, like I have for this whole situation, I realized some things. He might have acted selfishly at first, even if it was understandable, but my reaction could have been better, I admit. He was breaking down right in front of me, reliving trauma that reminded him of his childhood. And I was too busy in my own feelings to offer any true support. I felt awful about that. I didn't mention much of it in the previous post, but his parents were truly awful people. Their neglect caused the undeveloped, regressed state of the twins in the first place, and if he hadn't taken care of them while they were small, they possibly wouldn't have survived. They're very attached to him, almost like a small child with their parent. As painful as it was, I accepted that I couldn't come before their relationship. I did know about his legal obligation before we became married, so I obviously knew they were important to him. I have no bitter feelings toward the two. They're innocent in this situation and are very precious in their ways in general. As far as our future plans, we agreed that we'd wait a few years, 3 at the max, before truly deciding if we wanted to have a child or not. We were on the fence, but I was falling in love with the idea of motherhood perhaps more than I realized. He was also very receptive about having designated areas that were staff only and me only. It's already been implemented a bit, with still more things to out in place, and I'm feeling a lot better about that already. And lastly, I realize that this may seem like the fool's option to some, to the many who jumped straight to divorce. But now I know of all the facts and where he stands, so anything that may happen from now will be completely on me. I feel hopeful in my decision, and am not wanting to give up. For him, and the marriage that I still value so much, I am willing to give it a try and try to adjust to our new normal. I'm happy for you that you've been able to find an understanding with your husband, that you can both work with short term, but you really don't sound happy at all. You sound like a devoted, loving woman who is resigned to sacrificing much of what she wants and deserves in life in order to preserve a marriage where you currently rank 3rd in your husband's eyes. I would really encourage you to continue thinking about whether this is the life you want, and if it's the life you want for your future child. If you truly believe you can make it work, then great. I hope you can. Divorce is hard and scary, especially when it's no one's fault. But no one wins when you stay in a marriage just because one person wants things to work out.